Commander Varexa believed in control. She had planned this moment for many cycles. Every detail was approved. Every outcome was predicted. According to her people, humans were simple creatures. Emotional, short-lived, easy to guide. They were useful for research, short bonding experiments, and nothing more. This was supposed to be one controlled mating session, nothing else. The human stood inside the white chamber, waiting. His hands were calm at his sides. His breathing was slow. He did not look around in fear like the others had. He did not beg. He did not avoid her eyes. That was the first problem. Varexa entered the room with perfect posture. Her species was taller, stronger, and biologically superior. At least that was what the data always said. Her skin shimmered faintly under the lights, a sign of high genetic rank. She expected the human to lower his head. He did single quotes d. Instead, he looked at her with quiet focus. Not hunger. Not fear. Just attention. She felt a strange pause inside her chest. Subject confirmed, the ship AI said. Human male. Bond test ready. Varexa nodded once. Begin phase 1. This was routine. Humans reacted in predictable ways. Elevated heart rate. Nervous movement. Emotional weakness. It made them easy to manage. But the sensors showed something unexpected. The human's heart rate was steady. His name, according to the file, was Elias Ward, a civilian scientist, not a soldier. No combat history. No genetic enhancements. Remove your outer clothing. Varexa ordered. Elias complied without delay. No hesitation. No shame. He followed instructions calmly, like this was a discussion, not a command. That made her uncomfortable. Most humans tried to speak. Some tried to impress. Some tried to resist. Elias did none of those things. When he finished, he looked at her again. May I ask a question, Commander? That was not allowed. Varexa's eyes narrowed. You may speak. Is this truly one session? He asked. His voice was steady, respectful. Or is that what you tell yourself? The question hit harder than she expected. That is not your concern, she said. He nodded slowly. Understood. But the ship AI interrupted. Neural alignment beginning earlier than expected. Varexa turned sharply toward the display. That should not happen yet. Emotional connection usually formed after prolonged exposure. She stepped closer to Elias, studying his face. Humans were fragile. Their skin was soft. Their eyes showed too much. And yet, his eyes were calm. You are not reacting correctly, she said. Elias smiled slightly. Not mocking. Not challenging. Maybe your data is old. Her fingers tightened. Humans were not supposed to say things like that. She activated the bonding field. Energy hummed softly around them. This was the moment when humans usually broke. When fear showed. When attachment began. Instead, Elias closed his eyes and breathed out slowly. Varexa felt it then. A shift. Not desire. Not fear. Awareness. Her thoughts felt. Touched. Like someone had opened a door she didn't know existed. She stepped back suddenly. Pause the session, she ordered. There was a brief silence. Then the AI spoke again. Unable to comply. Bond process initiated. That was impossible. Varexa stared at the human. What did you do? Elias opened his eyes. There was concern in them now. Not panic. Concern for her. I did nothing, he said. I think. This only works if both sides expect control. Humans don't bond that way. Her breath caught. That made no sense. Her people believed bonding was biological dominance. What do humans bond with? She asked, almost without meaning to. Elias thought for a moment. Choice, he said quietly. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the system adjusted. Data streamed faster. Warning symbols appeared. Varexa's heart was beating too fast. She had planned one session. One clean experiment. One ending. But the human was not a subject. He was a variable. And for the first time in her long career, Commander Varexa realized something terrifying. She was no longer fully in control. Commander Varexa did not sleep. Her species did not need much rest, but this was different. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt it again. That strange pull. That quiet pressure inside her thoughts. It was not pain. It was not pleasure. It was awareness. She stood alone in the observation chamber, watching the human through the clear wall. Elias Ward sat calmly on the resting platform. His posture was relaxed. His breathing was slow. He looked like someone waiting, not someone trapped. That was wrong. The bond process had stopped halfway, frozen by the system. It should have released him already. Instead, the ship AI kept him inside the protected chamber. Explain the delay, Varexa ordered. Bond instability detected, the AI replied. Human neural patterns do not match expected submission models. Submission models. Varexa felt irritation rise inside her. Humans always submitted. Emotionally or biologically. That was the rule. That was the truth her people had followed for centuries. She entered the chamber. Again. Elias looked up when she approached. His eyes showed relief, not fear. You're back, he said. You should be resting. She replied. So should you, he answered softly. That sentence should not have mattered. But it did. Varexa stopped a short distance from him. Sensors on the walls tracked her heart rate. It was elevated again. That made no sense. She was trained, disciplined, superior. You are causing system errors, she said. Elias tilted his head slightly. Or the system is wrong about humans. She stared at him. His voice carried no challenge. Only calm certainty. You were selected for one session, Varexa said. After that, you would return to your people with memory suppression. And now? He asked. She did not answer immediately. The truth was uncomfortable. The memory suppression had already failed. His mind was too organized, too self-aware. The bond had tried to connect, but instead of breaking him, it had linked them. Weakly, quietly. Dangerously. You should be afraid, she said. This situation is not safe for you. Elias smiled faintly. Commander, with respect, I don't think this situation is safe for you either. Her fingers curled at her side. Humans react emotionally, she said. You should be showing fear, confusion, desire. Humans feel all of those things, Elias replied. We just don't let them decide everything. That answer stayed with her. She turned away and activated a floating display. Data flowed across it. Neural graphs. Hormone levels. Emotional markers. The readings from Elias were stable. The readings from her were not. That is impossible, she whispered. What is? Elias asked. She looked at him again. He was watching her, not the displays. Watching her face. Her posture. You are observing me, she said. Yes, he replied. You're the one changing. That struck deeper than any insult. Before she could respond, the chamber doors opened sharply. 2 alien officers entered, their expressions tense. Commander, one said. The council has noticed the delay. Varexa felt a cold weight settle inside her chest. How? She asked. Your biometric signals spiked, the officer replied. The bond field recorded mutual resonance. Mutual, that word was dangerous. The human will be removed, the officer continued. This experiment is compromised. Elias stood slowly. I didn't ask for this, he said calmly. But I won't be treated like equipment. The officers froze. No human had ever spoken that way in front of them. Varexa raised her hand. Wait, they turned to her in shock. She should have agreed. She should have ended it. That was the correct action, But she hesitated. "Give me 1 cycle," she said. "I will stabilize the bond or terminate it myself." The officers exchanged glances, then nodded reluctantly and left. Silence returned. Elias looked at her. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," she said quietly. "I did." She didn't know why she said it. But it was true. The AI spoke again. "Warning. Prolonged exposure increasing bond depth." Virex's eyes widened. "How much time do we have? Before permanent connection?" The AI replied. "Unknown." Elias met her gaze. There was no triumph in his eyes, only concern. "Commander," he said, "humans don't bond fast. But when we do, we don't let go easily." Her breath caught. For the first time, Commander Virexa understood the real danger. This was never about control, and the human was not the one at risk. Commander. Virexa's mind was unsettled. The human, Elias Ward, was no longer just a subject. He was a puzzle she could not solve, a variable that refused to follow the rules of her people. The council had demanded Elias be removed from the chamber. No human had ever defied them. The order was absolute. Yet, when the officers returned to escort him, Elias did not move. "You must come with us," one officer said firmly. Elias tilted his head. "I will not leave. Not until I understand what is happening here." The officers exchanged nervous glances. Virexa stepped forward. Her presence alone silenced the room. She had authority, power, and training that no human could match. And yet, she hesitated. "You will obey the council," she said, her voice steady but slightly strained. Elias looked at her. Not with fear, not with challenge, just calm resolve. "Commander," he said softly, "I respect you. But humans do not obey by instinct. We choose, and I choose to stay." "Your species underestimates us," Elias said, his gaze steady. "Not because we are weak, but because you never expected us to endure, to think beyond instinct, to teach through patience." Virexa's chest tightened. That realization was dangerous. If the council understood what had happened, there would be chaos. But if she acted wisely, there could be change, real change. She looked at the crew outside the chamber. They were watching, unsure, hesitant, inspired. The subtle influence of the bond was spreading. Aliens who had dismissed humans as fragile were now reconsidering their assumptions. "You've started something," Virexa said quietly. "No," Elias replied. "We are continuing something. Something humans have always done." The AI continued to monitor, but even its cold logic could not fully calculate the depth of the shift. This was beyond prediction, beyond control. The human's presence had already altered the balance of power, the perception of value, the way beings measured one another. The bond was no longer about Virexa or Elias alone. It had become a symbol, a proof that humans could endure, adapt, and influence. A small but undeniable testament to their subtle power. Virexa took a deep breath. If the council knew, they would see this as defiance. Punishment is certain. Elias smiled faintly. "Then let them see. Some lessons cannot be unlearned." Her eyes followed him as he walked to the observation window, calm, thoughtful, and present. She felt something stirring inside her, a sense of pride, of admiration, and perhaps of respect she had never given freely. The bond continued to grow, stronger and more complex. She understood finally that humans did not dominate the galaxy by conquest or force. They conquered hearts, minds, and systems quietly, slowly, persistently, and the effect was unstoppable once it began. "Humans are dangerous," she whispered, almost to herself. "Not because they take, but because they endure. They survive, and they teach others to survive as well." Elias turned his gaze toward her. "We do not seek to rule by fear. We survive by choice." And sometimes that is enough to change everything. Virexa nodded, a new awareness settling in her mind. The bond had changed her. The human had changed her. And the galaxy would never see humans the same way again. In that quiet moment, Commander Virexa realized one session had been planned. One experiment intended, but the bond had changed everything. Commander Virexa stood on the observation deck, watching the stars streak past the hull. Elias Ward was beside her, silent, calm, and steady. The bond between them hummed softly, a subtle force, invisible yet undeniable. It was no longer just about them. It was about what humans represented. The council had convened again. This time, their deliberations were tense. Some delegates had begun to notice the influence of the human on the ship, on morale, on thinking. They whispered about changes in the crew's behavior, subtle shifts in loyalty and respect, small but persistent acts of endurance and courage. Virexa's chest tightened as she considered it. Humans were not dominant in the traditional sense. They did not enforce rule by fear, strength, or coercion. Yet they commanded respect, quietly, patiently, relentlessly. They underestimate us, Elias said softly. Always, they see only strength and power. They forget the quiet ways humans endure. Virexa looked at him. And you are proving them wrong? He smiled faintly. Not proving, showing. Humans do not rush to dominate. We survive by learning, by connecting, by teaching others to survive alongside us. We influence slowly, steadily, and deeply. That is our strength. The council's next session was tense. Delegates spoke in hushed tones, measuring words carefully. The High Delegate stared at Virexa, his expression unreadable. "Commander," he said finally, "the human remains on your ship. His influence cannot be denied. But is he a threat or a tool?" Virexa's eyes narrowed. She knew the answer. Humans were neither. They were catalysts. Subtle, persistent catalysts. They did not destroy with force. They did not demand obedience. They changed systems, hearts, and minds in ways no one expected. "Your calculations fail to measure humans accurately," she said. "You treat them as subjects, tools, or variables. They are none of these. They endure. They adapt. They influence quietly, yet their effects are irreversible. Elias Ward is proof." A murmur spread through the council. Some delegates frowned. Others looked thoughtful. A few nodded slowly. Change was unsettling, but undeniable. Elias stepped forward, calm and respectful. "I do not seek to overthrow or dominate. I seek only to understand and to connect. And in doing so, I will endure. You cannot erase that. You cannot control it. That is the way of humanity." The High Delegate's gaze lingered on him, then on Virexa. Finally, he spoke. "Then let it be recorded. Humans shall not be erased. They shall not be dismissed. Their influence, subtle and persistent, shall be acknowledged." Virexa felt a weight lift. The council had accepted, at least for now. Humans would no longer be seen as weak, temporary, or irrelevant. Their quiet power had shifted perceptions, laws, and expectations. She glanced at Elias. He was calm, unassuming, yet he had done more than any warrior, diplomat, or strategist. He had endured. He had taught without force. He had changed minds simply by existing, by being human. "The galaxy does not see humans this way yet," she whispered. "But it will." Elias smiled faintly. "We do not need them to see. We endure anyway. We connect anyway. And that is enough." Virexa realized the truth in his words. Humans did not need dominance to succeed. Their power was subtle, patient, persistent. They survived because they could endure. They influenced because they could connect. They thrived because they could teach others to endure too. The bond between them pulsed softly. It was a reminder, a symbol, a testament to humanity's quiet strength. Not through aggression, not through fear, but through awareness, endurance, and the ability to adapt and influence. Commander Varexa finally understood. The council, the systems, the hierarchy, none of it could fully contain what humans represented. And Elias Ward, one simple human, had proven it in the quietest, most profound way. The stars streaked past the ship as they stood together. The galaxy was vast, full of rules, laws, and expectations. Yet humanity had already begun to leave its mark, not with power, but with quiet. Enduring strength. And that strength was unstoppable. The galaxy was quiet that cycle. But beneath the calm, change was stirring. Commander Varexa stood on the deck, watching the stars stretch across the void. Elias Ward was beside her, silent, steady, and calm as ever. The council had accepted the inevitable. Humans were no longer merely tools or subjects. Their quiet endurance, their subtle influence, their ability to survive, connect, and teach, these qualities had begun to reshape alien perceptions. Varexa felt the bond between them pulsing softly. It was no longer just a biological link. It was a symbol of humanity's strength. She thought back to the first session she had planned so meticulously, confident in control, certain in her authority. One session. One experiment. That was all she had intended. But humans had a way of changing the rules. They believed we were weak, Elias said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. But endurance is power. Connection is power. And subtle influence done with awareness is unstoppable. Varexa nodded. I see it now. Humans are dangerous not because they dominate, but because they endure. They survive by adapting, by connecting, by teaching others to survive with them. Elias's calm smile held a quiet pride, the kind that did not need to be announced. He did not claim victory. He only existed, and that existence was enough to prove a point that no calculation, no weapon, no council decree could erase. Outside, the ship's crew moved with new awareness. Officers who had once seen humans as fragile or expendable now respected them. They adapted their behavior subtly, unconsciously influenced by Elias's calm certainty. It was the kind of change that no order could command, no law could enforce. Varexa turned to him. Your people. Your species. You've survived against odds no one would measure. Not by force. Not by fear. By endurance. Elias nodded. We survive, Commander. We endure. And sometimes, endurance teaches others to endure as well. That is the quiet power of humanity. The Council had been forced to acknowledge it. Human influence, subtle yet pervasive, had already begun to alter the rules of engagement, perception, and respect in the galaxy. They could no longer dismiss humans. They could not contain them. Varexa's heart, still humanly unpredictable under the influence of the bond, felt a strange warmth, respect, awareness, something more she could not name. She realized she had underestimated humans for too long. The session she had planned had taught her more than any experiment, any rule, or any data ever could. Humans do not rule with fear, she said softly. They conquer hearts, minds, and ideas, slowly, quietly, persistently, and that is why they endure. Elias looked at the stars ahead. We do not seek to dominate, Commander. We seek to exist, to connect, to survive. But our existence, our influence will be felt. It is inevitable. And it is enough. Varexa smiled faintly. She had planned one session, one controlled event. She had believed that humans were fragile, predictable, and temporary. But Elias Ward had taught her a lesson she would never forget. Humans did not break under pressure. They endured. They influenced. They changed everything around them without force, without domination, without fear. Her power flickered like lightning trapped in a crystal. Guards raised their weapons, ready to strike if it went wrong. Energy readings went off the charts. Everyone expected an explosion, a disaster. But nothing happened. Eli took a slow step forward. His voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. "You don't have to fight me," he said. "I'm not your enemy." The princess stared at him, her glowing eyes narrowing. She could feel the energy in her body twisting, reacting to him. For the first time, her power did not threaten him. Instead, it seemed curious. "What are you?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but echoed in the hall. It was not anger, not fear, just confusion, unjust. "Human," Eli said simply. "Like everyone else. But I understand you." The hall gasped. Every being turned to watch. No one had ever dared to speak to the princess like this. No one had ever tried to understand her. They only feared her. They only obeyed the rules. Eli took another step closer. The air around him was charged, but not with danger. It felt calm, like a strange shield. "You've been alone too long," he said softly. "Everyone else ran away, but I didn't." The princess froze. Her hand, which had been raised instinctively, slowly lowered. The energy around her became stable, almost gentle. It was a strange, unfamiliar feeling, one that no one had ever caused in her before. Scientists behind shields stared at their instruments. The readings made no sense. Her power was fluctuating, but instead of going out of control, it was steady, slowing, contained. "Why are you not afraid?" she whispered. Eli smiled, a small, confident smile. "Because fear doesn't help anyone. And because I think you're not a monster." The words hit her like a shockwave. Every instinct, every memory, every lesson she had been taught about fear and power and destruction told her that humans were weak, that fear was natural, that no one could face her. Yet here he was, a human, standing in front of her, looking at her not as a weapon, but as someone alone, someone who needed to be seen. The council leader shouted again, panic rising in his voice. "Remove him. This is dangerous." But she did not move. Her energy remained calm, her power at bay. For the first time in galactic history, the most feared being in the universe hesitated because of a human. Eli took another step. "You don't have to fight them," he said quietly. "Just look at me." She did. And for the first time, she felt something she had never known: trust. Not blind trust, not naive hope, but the calm certainty that someone was willing to face her without fear and without judgment. A murmur ran through the hall. Aliens whispered to each other, shocked by what they were witnessing. Humans had always been underestimated, weak, fragile, unprepared, yet this one human stood where none had dared. And somehow that made all the difference. The princess's glowing eyes softened. The dangerous storm inside her slowed, swirling gently like calm water after a hurricane. She looked at Eli, and for the first time, she wondered if the galaxy had been wrong about humans all along. The guards lowered their weapons slightly, hesitant, unsure. The council watched with bated breath. The hall, once filled with fear, was now filled with a new kind of tension. Not danger, but anticipation, because everyone knew deep down that something extraordinary had just begun. And it all started with one human who refused to feel fear. The hall was quiet, but the silence no longer felt heavy. It was different, now charged with something new. Curiosity, tension, and the faintest hint of hope filled the space between the alien princess and Eli. The princess, still glowing faintly, took a cautious step back. Her eyes, deep like dark stars, studied him carefully. She had faced fear, anger, and death in every form imaginable, but nothing like this. Nothing like a human who did not run, did not fight, and yet stayed. You are not afraid," she said again, almost as if trying to understand the concept. I am, Eli admitted. But I'm not afraid of you. Not in the way everyone else is. The princess's gaze flickered. She had never heard anyone speak to her like this. Her life had been rules, fear, and distance. No one had ever tried to understand her, not truly. Why? Why do you look at me like that? She asked softly, her voice trembling just slightly. Eli took a careful step closer. Because I think you're lonely. The words were simple. Almost too simple. Yet they struck her harder than any weapon ever could. She had spent her life surrounded by people who either feared or hated her. Nobody had ever said she looked lonely. Nobody had ever looked at her without fear. Lonely? She whispered, almost to herself. Yes, Eli said. You are powerful. Dangerous. But that doesn't mean you are not alone. And being alone, it's the worst kind of fear. The princess lowered her head slightly, and the energy around her softened even more. She had felt power all her life, but she had never felt this calm, this unthreatened. It was strange, confusing, and yet comforting. I did not know how to. She paused, struggling to find the words. How to be. Not a weapon. You don't have to be one, Eli said gently. Not all the time. Not with me. The hall around them seemed to fade. The council members, the guards, and the alien species all watched silently, holding their breaths. Even they could feel that something unusual was happening. The most feared being in the galaxy was no longer dangerous, not because of restraint, but because someone believed in her differently. The princess's glowing eyes softened further. Her hand, once tense and ready to unleash destruction at any threat, now rested calmly at her side. She tilted her head, studying Eli. You are human, she said slowly, almost as if tasting the word. Yes, Eli replied with a small smile. And maybe that's why I can do this. Humans, we face fear differently. We stumble, we fall, we fail, but we keep going. We do not always run from what scares us. Her mind spun with this concept. She had seen countless species tremble and obey out of fear. Humans were weak, fragile. Yet somehow this one stood tall, calm, and brave. She could feel something she had never felt before. Hope. The council leader shouted suddenly, breaking the fragile calm. Human, step back immediately. You are violating all protocol. Eli looked at him, then back at the princess. I'm not stepping back. Not until you know I am not a threat. Not until you know someone sees you as more than power. Her energy flickered, this time not with danger, but curiosity. She had been isolated her entire life. Everyone had always stepped away. Everyone except him. And now, standing before her, he spoke words that felt like warmth. Words that felt like understanding. For the first time she wondered, could someone really see her as more than her strength? Could someone truly understand her? Yes, perhaps. She whispered, almost unsure of herself. Perhaps you are different. Yes, Eli said simply. I am different. Because I choose to stay. The hall gasped at the exchange. Aliens whispered nervously. Humans were known to be reckless, but this was something else. They could not understand it, but the princess understood it, in a way she had never understood anything before. For the first time in her life, someone was not afraid of her. Someone did not see her as a weapon. Someone believed in her, just as she was, and in that quiet, fragile moment, a bond began to form. One that could change everything him, and perhaps the fate of the entire galaxy. The council leader tried to speak again. But even his words sounded weak compared to the strange. New calm spreading between the human and the alien princess. The galaxy had seen power, fear, and destruction. But it had never seen understanding, and that understanding had just begun. The calm in the grand hall was fragile, like ice on a deep, dark lake. Every being present could feel it, a quiet tension that promised either peace or disaster. But outside the hall, the galaxy did not wait. Word of what had just happened spread like wildfire. A human had not only faced the alien princess, but had calmed her, something no other being had ever done. Rumors traveled faster than ships. Across planets and star systems, whispers of the human's bravery and his foolishness ignited fear and anger. Inside the hall, the council was in chaos. "This is unacceptable," shouted the council leader, pounding his staff against the floor. "The human has violated every safety protocol. He has endangered the princess and the entire galaxy. He's a threat," muttered one elder alien. "We cannot allow this. We must act now." But the princess, standing a few steps away from Eli, shook her head. Her glowing eyes softened, but there was a hint of defiance in them. "He is not a threat," she said simply. "He is the first who has not treated me as one." Murmurs of shock and disbelief ran through the hall. Aliens who had feared her for centuries could not understand. A human, weak by physical standards, had done what no fleet, no army, no diplomat had ever done. He had touched her mind and calmed her power with courage alone. The council leader, however, was relentless. "Remove him. Guards, take him away immediately." Security forces began to move, but the princess raised her hand. A faint pulse of energy radiated from her, enough to make every soldier pause. Her power did not lash out, but it warned them not to move too quickly. Eli stepped forward, calm and unshaken. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "Not now. Not ever. You cannot force me away from someone who is alone." The words were simple, yet filled with resolve. And in that moment, everyone understood something. This human had faced fear differently. While others ran, hid, or obeyed blindly, he had chosen courage. Outside the hall, the